now, mates, lend an ear.
Hear us now.
Captain Franz at the helm, so steer. Gather round the partnership's deck.
Scripts command.
Tales from the leaders of the partnership train. So we chant by the podcast glow. Through veritable seas to boxes flow. Dar die. Hoist the sail.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Partnership. I am incredibly excited about this one because we have the author of one of my favorite books on the call today. Hans Peter Bech is the best-selling author of several books with multiple decades of experience in business development and partnerships, including at a company called Navision, which is a Danish software company with over 2,000 partners and billions in dollars in revenue. And it also became the first company that Microsoft acquired for over $1 billion outside of the US. So a huge deal. And that acquisition is detailed in one of Hans Peter's books called 5,460 Miles from Silicon Valley, and also partially discussed in Building Successful Partner Channels in the Software Industry, which is one of my favorite books. So I'm incredibly excited for this chat today. Thanks for joining us, Hans Peter.
Franz Josef, thank you very much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah. So the book is like so jam-packed with insights. Like I want to give you a brief insight on like how I first got to know it, because I initially listened to the audiobook. And when I listened to the audiobook while I was in the grocery shop, I had to like constantly stop. I think I spent 2 hours in the grocery store because I constantly had to stop the audiobook, take notes, then continue listening to it. And there was just like one revelation after the other. And so I really hope for today's call, we get through a handful of them and like get more people excited about the book and hopefully read it afterwards as well. So I wanted to start with the story behind building successful partner channels. How did you get the idea to write the book, and like what was the business, what were the business insights that inspired it?
Thank you for asking that question. I've built and managed partner channels in the IT industry for more than 40 years. The first 20 years in an operational role where I built and managed the partner channels, and the next 20 years as a management consultant where I helped clients build or expand their partner channels, which led me to believe that a book on the subject was required. I was then very fortunate because I was invited to deliver a series of workshops on this and other business development subjects to a Turkish audience. I was invited by the Turkish Export Association for Technology, and I was made an external lecturer at the Sabancı University in Istanbul to deliver a course on building software channels in the software industry, doing international business and so on. And that gave me the opportunity to develop and structure the material. And when I came back home, all I had to do was to reformat it from a course and into a book. It sounds easy. It's not that easy to do that, but at least all the preparation was done to deliver these courses as university. And the book came out a year later, and it became an instant bestseller.
Yeah, that's incredible. I really like that story because I think people always assume that you sit down and go like, I'm going to write a book, and then you start thinking about the subject and start putting together the content, etc. But in reality, it's often starting from, I already have this huge amount of content. It's already well structured. Now I just need to put it into a book as well. Yeah. And in the book, you can see just like the amount of effort and experience that went into it, and like the thoughtfulness for each subject as well. So I want to make sure that we get through as many of these, different parts of the book as possible. And the one which really stood out to me is, when should startups invest in a channel motion? Because I feel like it's still a very controversial subject. Like last year, I posted a poll on LinkedIn, and a lot of people said like instantly, like over 50% on that poll said like you should from day one invest in channel. But I don't think that's the right answer. So I'm curious for your thoughts. Like, when do you think is the right time for startups to invest in channel?
Yeah. I get that question a lot too, and I did a series of videos a couple of years ago for Microsoft, and they're on my YouTube channel. So I urge the audience to go through those channels. They are 5 minutes each, and they give answers to some of these questions. But getting back to answer your question, when to channel and when not to. I get that question a lot, and the first thing I ask is, what do you understand by a channel? and it seems that there is not widespread agreement on what a channel is. So let me define what I mean by a channel, or at least what a channel means in my book, Building Successful Partner Channels.
Yeah.
Discussing channel partners, I refer to a situation where you have many partners. And how many are many? There should be so many that you should not be affected by losing one or two of them. So if you're thinking about a partnership is finding someone in Germany who can sell your product to German companies, that's not a channel. That is a strategic relationship, because if you lose that relationship, you no longer have a business in Germany. So when I'm talking about building a channel in, let's say, just Germany, which is such a big country here in Europe, I would say you need to probably to have about 20 partners and more before we refer to it as a channel. So when to channel and when not to, the first question you need to ask is there already a channel? Is there already an infrastructure of independent business partners that do what you do? Do they manage products like yours, and do they serve customers for your products already? And if there is not a channel, then you have a serious issue, because then you need to build a channel before you have a channel. In the other situation where there is a channel, you also have issues, obviously, because you need to convince them to change whatever they do today with your product. So there is a switching issue. Or maybe there is a channel where your product will fit in as an add-on or a natural extension. And if that is the case, then you can consider, as a startup or entering a new market, to see if you can tap into that channel. If the channel doesn't exist, then my recommendation would be, don't try to build a channel that doesn't exist if you're a startup. That's going to take way too long. You have to start your business going directly, and then later on, you can consider whether to change some of your go-to-market approach to be served through an indirect channel.
Yeah. I think that's spot on. It's something which I mentioned in like my content and the book as well. That partner programs are not something that you necessarily build, but something you discover or uncover. And so like there has to be some sort of kernel there already. There has to be like some sort of interest or some sort of like relationship with a couple of partners already, where you then go like, okay, let's invest more. But going out and saying like partnerships are going to be huge for us, but we don't have anybody who we work with, there are just so many things that could go wrong. Like there's so many unknowns in that it's probably not the right time yet.
Well, you can, if you are trying to build a channel of partners with people or companies that doesn't operate in your domain, you will have to convince people to invest in your type of business. Right? It's a very probably long and steep learning curve that you have people to go through.
Yeah.
So that's a tough job. While if there is a channel who is already doing what you are doing, then they will immediately understand the value of what you offer, and can assess whether that can add any value to their business. So it's two completely different scenarios.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a saying in my book that if you have money enough, go direct. If you have time enough, build a channel.
Yeah, that one stood out to me a lot, and I've been thinking about that as well, because in my mind, like partnerships and like a channel are actually a way to go or like to achieve your goal quicker. So like in a way, like they're a way, like you get to where you want to go faster. And so I'm giving you an example. Of my previous company, Hopin, we were a virtual events company, and so we did online events. And during the pandemic, all of a sudden this exploded, and everybody needed to do their events online. And so we worked a lot with event agencies, like agencies which put on events for their customers to
Hmm.
implement these events and to sell Hopin and to like make sure that like we have a foothold in Germany and in France and so forth. Um, and so that allowed us to like within a couple months be globally available and serviced globally as well. The
Hmm.
downside of it though was like, we didn't make as much money from them because obviously the partner wanted their cut as well, and we also didn't control the partners. So the partner
Hmm.
was still like, running their own business, and we didn't have that
Yeah.
control. So I'm curious, like where you where that saying comes from, and like how you think that relates to this story as well.
Well, theoretically, you can, from a logical approaching the question logically,
Yeah.
if you want to sell your product to customers, you can pick up the phone and you can call potential customers.
Yeah.
If you want to sell your product to customers through partners, you first have to find, recruit, and onboard the partners before you can sell to customers. It must take longer. Now, if you're a startup or if you're moving into a country or a new market where you have little experience, your conversation with the partners you will have a hard time having an intelligent conversation with the partners because you have no experience with the market.
Mm,
So you are learning together with the partners, and that takes longer than if you go direct, get some customers. When you have a reasonable number of customers, you go out and find partners and say, hey, would you do business for us if we provide the customers? Because that's the biggest issue for most partners. That's to find and win the customers.
yeah.
Obviously, when you go to if you go through a partner channel, your first objective is to sell to their existing customers. But as I write in the book, that's seldom the motivation for partners to sign up. The reason they sign up is to sell the products to new customers, because that's where they have the biggest challenge. That's to win new customers. So you have a double learning curve. First, you need to onboard them and make them capable of selling your products. And then they have to go out and do the same to new customers. And that's a second learning curve. So it will take longer. Now, the example or the case that you referred to just a while ago is a little different, because if you have a compelling event in a market, if there is a major change in the market that will force either customers or partners to make a change, and you can fill that change, then you obviously have a different situation. But it's very seldom that you have a compelling situation, unfortunately. Most
Yeah.
of the time, you simply have to do the hard work and convince customers to replace the operations that your product support or your service support with your product and service, and that is a hard job, and that is a job that partners are not particularly suited for. And that's why I also in the book say that partners prefer to work with vendors that have recognized brands, because there is already a demand in the market for their products, and it makes their sales job easier.
Yeah. That one stood out to me as well. Like one quote from the book was that companies, their partners only want to work with the number one in any given industry. And so I
Yeah,
guess that's also a barrier for startups is like, are you the number one right now? If you're only like, three people in the basement somewhere, it's probably unlikely that you're the number one in like a certain market,
yeah,
right? Maybe if you're
yeah,
like very good or your market
yeah,
is very niche. But I
yeah.
assume like there needs to be like, you need to have a certain size to be recognized as the number one player. But I wanna ask if there, is an additional criteria you have beyond being like the number one in the market, for what makes a company well suited to work with partners.
Yeah. I'd like to look a value proposition from the customer's perspective. So let's put ourselves on the customer side of the table and ask a question like, what is the value for me as a customer that you offer your product through a reseller? What value does that provide me?
Mhm.
And if it doesn't provide any value that you have a reseller, then it's probably not a good idea to have a reseller. It doesn't add any value.
Yeah.
Let me give an example from my Navision days. Navision developed enterprise resource planning system, ERP systems.
Mhm.
And they didn't only have ERP systems, they also have a software development toolkit. So you could customize the ERP system to various industries.
Mhm.
So it was an advantage for a customer who wanted to buy a Navision solution that they could sign up with a reseller that had competence and skills in his particular domain. So he understood the business processes of the business and didn't have such a steep learning curve in understanding how the customer of how the software could be customized and integrated and implemented into his or her operation.
Mhm.
So that was one advantage for the customer. The other advantage for the customer, which were mainly mid-sized companies, was that the partner was closer by than the software company. Our software company was based in Copenhagen, and we had then subsidiaries around in Hamburg and in London and so forth. But medium-sized companies wanted to do business with someone who was more local. So we had partners in the various Bundesländer in Germany. So it was an advantage for the customer that could sign up with somebody who was not 100 kilometers away, right, but was closer. So there was a lot of advantages associated with having the products through partners. So if your service or product or value proposition doesn't benefit from having a partner in the customer's eyes, then this probably doesn't have any value for you in the market. Now, seen from the partner's perspective of this particular Navision case, the value add opportunity they had around the Navision product was immense. When they delivered a solution to a customer, only about 10% of the value of a project was the software from Navision. The 90% was implementation, training, customization, systems integration, and support. So there was an immense value add opportunity for the partners around the product. So
Mhm.
that's another thing I would look for. What is the value add potential around my product that will make this a very good business for my partners?
Yeah.
So that when my partners win a deal, the share of wallet that they have is not only the margin on my software, but it is also services and associated software that they add
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like the idea of a share of wallet.
yeah. So there is a huge advantage for the partners, and there is a huge advantage for the clients.
Yeah.
Now that all comes down to that Navision, the software vendor, had designed the product and the value proposition with the channel in mind. It was not an afterthought. And for most of the clients that call me and want help, the channel is an afterthought. They developed the product and they didn't think about what do we need to have in the product, on the side of the product, to make this an attractive product for a partner. So very often we need to go back to the drawing table and say, okay, we need to, at least in our development plans and in our direction, in our product strategy, to think how can we add benefit and value to the partners within
Yeah.
our value proposition.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think this resonates so well because this story of like partners generating or capturing a lot more value than a company seems to be like universal. Like one
Hmm.
example I always bring up is that, for every dollar Salesforce makes, partners make $7.
Yeah.
And it just shows you like how much value partners need to accrue. And it doesn't reach a lot of CEOs initially. Like a lot of like business leaders initially, when they hear this, they go like, well, that means I'm leaving enough, like too much value on the table. But partners have like a very low margin, service intensive business model, which requires them to like just earn more money as well. And so I wanted to talk with you as well about like one of the core ideas, which I referenced in my book, and like I just keep on thinking about every time when I talk about partnerships, is the idea of the overlapping business models, like the business model
Hmm.
canvas, and like making sure that your business models are competitive,
Yeah.
compatible.
Yeah. It's something that I write about in detail in the book, that typically a partner and a software vendor have two different value propositions. They also have two different mindsets. But when we're talking about channel and serving the market, the business partner is integrated into the software vendor's business model. If I don't know if everybody in the audience are familiar with the Alexander Osterwalder business model canvas. That seems to be the standard these days. And if
Yeah.
you think about the building blocks of the business model canvas, there is something called the channel. And if you're operating an indirect go-to-market approach, the building block channel is your business partner's business model.
Yeah.
So we're not only talking about having a nice product that does certain things for the customers, we're talking about building a value proposition for the business partners. Our job is to make the business partners' business successful.
Yeah.
And that brings me back to another principle that I have, that a channel, an indirect channel, is not the fast route to market.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have built your business channel, it's an excellent acceleration tool. When your channel model works, and you can show new and potential partners how other partners have generated great businesses around your product, then you can scale your business much faster than if you had to do it with your own resources only. So a channel is a scalability vehicle, and that's why it justifies the investment in time and money that you have to do to build the channel before revenue starts flowing. And if we go back to the Navision case again, there are other cases I could mention, but this Navision case is so well documented in the book that you mentioned. You can easily see that the growth of Navision was very slow in the start, and then it took off like a rocket. And that was the momentum they got from adding more and more partners. And then at a certain point, they reached what we call the tipping point, where partners started to call Navision and say, hey, we've seen that this other partner in this other city is doing great business with you, and could we have a conversation? And then the ball starts rolling. And that was how they actually captured all of the European market within 5 years and caught the attention of Microsoft, who knocked on the door and say, hey, when Microsoft decided to go into the ERP market, they first bought an American company, which name I have forgotten. And then
It was probably not that important.
No. Oh, they were. Okay. It was a company, by the way, who was headed by Doug Burgum, who is now in Trump's cabinet.
Oh, wow.
But the name just fails me. And then to get into the European market, Microsoft acquired Navision.
Yeah.
So by paying this $1.5 billion US, they got access to the mid market for ERP systems in Europe, which Navision has built essentially over 5 years.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I do want to quickly give a shout out to our audience. We have Dave in the audience who says Hans Peter Bech is amazing, and I share the sentiment. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll discuss them live in this last 5 minutes of the show. But one question which really struck me around the partner business models, which kind of helped me troubleshoot some of the issues we were running into, was just that sometimes the business models were conflicting because we created the wrong incentives. And so
Mm-hmm.
one example, for example, is the idea that you have to pay a referral fee. And
Yeah.
so you pay a referral fee, your software costs like $20,000 and you pay them like, 10% referral fee, which is like, $2,000. But a partner needs to earn a lot more than that. So clearly, like, the referral fee is not enough. And also you're setting up this incentive that like the partner might go to the next customer, like to the next company and say, like, these guys pay me 10%. Are you going to pay me 20 or 30?
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk to a lot of companies which have partner programs where they give away like 40% of their revenue or 50% to the partners just because they kind of entered this race to the bottom around referral fees. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about like partner incentives. Like what incentives exist? Like, do you think the referral fee is the answer, or how does that match up to like an MDF or a SPIF or other ways of incentivizing partners?
Yeah. Today, I believe so the standard margin that you get on selling a product which is a software as a service is around 20%. In my days when we sold perpetual licenses paid up front, it was about 35-40%. But software as a service, where you also deliver the infrastructure, where the vendor also delivered the infrastructure, it seems that the average is 20% margin. And those 20% are normally divided into a 50% cash margin and a 5% allocated to a marketing incentive fund.
Mm-hmm.
Now, answering the question, we need to again distinguish between situations. Are we talking about building a channel? Because when you're recruiting partners and onboarding partners, the margin is not that important, because the partner, to build the skills and allocate the resources required to win businesses, is an upfront investment, and he doesn't get the margin until the revenue comes in. So you're actually much better off if you can say, okay, we'll pay you, we'll pay part of the salary for the salespeople. We will co-sponsor the marketing activities. So you invest in him building the business, and he pays that off during the first businesses that he wins. So essentially, he doesn't get any margin, but he get co-investment in getting the business running, and that's much more important to him. Mm-hmm. When the business runs, you can then go to the standard format: 15% cash margin and 5% for the marketing incentive fund, where you again you have a program for how to use that money. And again, I have more details in my book how you do that, depending on what type of partner you're dealing with. And if it's a big partner, you can continue to pay some of the salary and help him grow even further. But the margin shouldn't be that important, because he's making his money on all the associated services, all the things around your product. And that's crucial, I believe, for building a successful partner channel, is that you have this opportunity to add value on top of your product.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's where like the idea of the overlapping business models was just so fascinating, right? Because it's like for every deal, at Hopin, we would sell event software, and so we would sell like $20,000 event software, and then the partner would charge 50 or 60 or 70 or maybe 100,000 for the services around it. And that was exactly, like way more interesting than like the $2,000 that we could offer as the margin. Like it's probably not even like it's a rounding error in terms of like what they actually need from us.
I don't think you should go out of your way to give high margins. You should just stick to the market standard.
Yeah. Got it. So we are almost at time. And so one of the things which I noticed for myself, like my book on partnerships came out like, less than a year ago, but already my understanding of it has evolved because I got so many questions and feedback points on it. And so I'm curious, like, how has your perception of partnerships or your understanding evolved since the book? What are some of the areas where you feel like you wanted to like put more emphasis on if you could write it again?
I started 40 years ago and nothing has changed. managing channels hasn't changed at all. It did change when we went from perpetual licenses, which were paid upfront, and to software as a service, because the revenue profile changed dramatically.
Mhm.
And that change took place around the time where I wrote my book. It was published in 2015, so it's 10 years ago. But since then, I would say nothing has changed. In terms of recruiting partners and the principle around recruiting partners and the principles around onboarding them and managing them and motivating them, that has not changed. A lot of the plumbing around revenue generation has obviously changed. And in my upcoming book, if I may do a little advertising here, called Revenue Generation Fundamentals,
Mhm.
I will go in much more into details of how you generate revenue when you do not have a widely recognized brand, because that is what I'm writing about, is typically tools for companies that are not market leaders. They have a great product, they have an opportunity, but nobody knows them. And they also have a small budget. So how can we, with this small budget but this great product, how can we make an impact in the market? So I'll write a book about that. But that doesn't really it doesn't really matter whether you're doing direct business or indirect business. That plumbing is the same.
Yeah.
But the principle around managing partners, recruiting partners, and onboarding them and managing them, that hasn't changed since I started 40 years ago. It's still a matter of helping somebody build a business.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing with partners. You're helping them building a business. And when they have built that business and when it's running, you treat them as partners. You wine them, you dine them, you invite them out, you have conferences, you make them feel important, and they are important, because without them, your business would fall apart. But you really and how to treat people as partners haven't changed that much.
Yeah. I think that's a very good observation, because ultimately, like, partnerships isn't something new. I think we're rediscovering it now because the markets are being disrupted and people realize, like, okay, people only want to buy from people who they trust. They don't care as much about, like, all the ads and stuff like that, because we just saturated those channels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's just a renaissance in the
Yeah.
idea that we want to work with partners again. But the fundamentals of how you work with partners, that's just been around for quite a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are at time, and I see Moritz is leaving the chat as well. But thanks for joining us, Moritz, and glad you enjoyed this session. Before we leave, though, I wanted to ask you if you could share one key takeaway that you think the audience should take away from this conversation today when it comes to building partnerships.
Yeah. If you want to build partnerships, think like a partner. Try to work not on your business model canvas, but on her business model canvas. And think, if somebody approached me with a product value proposition like the one you have, what would make me interested? Because, as I said before, you're helping somebody build a business, and building a business that takes taking a new product in and offering a new product, maybe to your existing or new customers. That's a hard thing to do. And what are you doing to help me get that business going? If you take that perspective, that'll take you a long way. Most people think about what's in it for me to have partners. It makes my life easier that I can leave all that work of calling potential customers and winning potential customers, partners. But that's not how you should think. You should think, why should I, as a partner, take on my product and resell it to my customer? Why should I invest in that? And how will you help me do that? That's a great perspective for building a productive and effective partner channel program.
Yeah, walk a mile in their shoes. That's such a great way to end the session. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Hans Peter. Apart from, like, building successful partner channels, the book, which everybody should read who's listening to this call right now, where else can people find you and your insights on partnerships?
I do a lot of blog posts. So I have two blogs. One is called tbkconsult.com. That's where I write about business stuff. I have another blog called hpbeck.com where I write about being a consultant and being an author. So if you have ambitions of being a consultant like me or write books like me, you can go there. If you want to have inspiration on how to develop your software business, you should go to tbkconsult.com. There's also a publishing section with tons of white papers that you can download for free. And some of them cost a couple of dollars, and my books are typically around $9.99 for the ebook version and $15 for the paperback. So it's very affordable.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I write regularly. And I also have a YouTube channel. So I do YouTubes on various subjects from time to time, and there you can find me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for putting all the information out there. That's a wrap for today's show. I really appreciate you taking the time, Hans Peter, and also everybody who in the audience who joined us today. Moritz, Dave, really appreciate you taking the time to join us live. We'll be back in 2 weeks with our next episode of The Partnership. See you then.
Hark now, mates, lend an ear.
Hear us now.
Captain Franz at the helm, so steer. Gather round the partnership's deck.
Scripts command.
Tales from the leaders of the partnership train. So we chant by the podcast glow. Through veritable seas to boxes flow. Dar, oh, die. Hoist the sail.